Read the script word for word. Don't add anything from yourself. Just read the fucking script. In 2023, a murder in Seoul shocked a nation obsessed with social status, but the police were so focused on the parasite-like motive, they overlooked the digital footprint that pointed to the killer from day one. This is the story of a crime that seemed ripped from a blockbuster film, a story of envy and ambition that blinded investigators to the cold, hard data left behind. A story of how a single overlooked clue can rewrite an entire narrative. We begin in the affluent Gangnam district, a glittering world of luxury high-rises and private academies. Here, in an apartment worth millions, lived the victim, Kim Jun-ho, a 45-year-old investment fund manager. And here, in the same building, lived the prime suspect, Park Min-sik, a 44-year-old freelance tutor. Their lives were a mirror of the film Parasite. Two families, one wealthy, one struggling, occupying the same physical space, but worlds apart in fortune. Jun-ho's son was Min-sik's most promising student, and Min-sik's deepest aspiration was to have a fraction of Jun-ho's success. The tension was palpable, a classic cocktail of resentment and perceived entitlement. So when Jun-ho was found bludgeoned to death in his study late on a Tuesday night, the motive seemed obvious. The police had their narrative before they even had the evidence. This was a crime of class warfare, a desperate man snapping under the weight of inequality. They looked at Park Min-sik and saw a killer, and in doing so, they missed everything. Act 1. The obvious narrative. The investigation launched with a powerful bias. Park Min-sik had no verifiable alibi. He claimed he was home, alone, preparing lesson plans. Witnesses reported hearing raised voices from Jun-ho's apartment around 8 p.m., a time when Min-sik's student, Jun-ho's son, was at a cram school. Min-sik had access. He had a key, entrusted to him for tutoring sessions. Forensics found partial, smudged fingerprints on a heavy crystal bookend, the presumed murder weapon. They matched Min-sik's, but he'd been in that study countless times. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was compelling. It fit a story the public and the press were eager to consume. The Parasite murder dominated headlines. The police, under immense pressure, zeroed in. They interrogated Min-sik for hours, pressing on his financial struggles, his envy of the victim's lifestyle. They found searches on his computer for news articles about income inequality, and damningly, the film Parasite itself. The case was, to them, closing. But a junior digital forensic analyst, Officer Lee Soo-jin, was tasked with a routine evidence dump from the victim's devices. And in the chaotic focus on motive and class, her initial report was filed, noted, and essentially ignored. Because what she found didn't fit the story. It pointed somewhere else entirely. This was the turning point, the lock that sealed the real mystery. The police had a suspect in custody, but the victim's digital ghost was whispering another name. Act 2. The Digital Ghost. While the interrogation rooms echoed with questions about envy, Officer Lee was silently mapping a timeline from Jun-ho's smartphone and laptop. The data painted a picture of a man in crisis, but not one related to his tutor. Jun-ho's final hours were a frantic digital scramble. At 7:03 p.m., he received a secured, encrypted message via an app popular for discreet communications. The content was deleted, but metadata remained. A 12-minute call followed. At 7:47 p.m., Jun-ho accessed a hidden folder on his laptop, labeled with a single ominous character. The folder contained financial audits, not of his legitimate fund, but of a shell company. And at 8:15 p.m., just minutes after the alleged time of the murder, his smart home system logged a routine automated backup. This backup held the untouched, raw data from his apartment's sensors. This was the overlooked footprint. The police had the system's live log, which showed nothing unusual. They never pulled the forensic backup. Officer Lee did, and she found an anomaly. At 8:07 p.m., the ambient noise sensor in Jun-ho's study spiked for a sustained 42 seconds. The sound profile was analyzed. It wasn't the blunt, singular impact of a bookend. It was a struggle. Grunts, scuffling, the sound of two people. And then, a voice that was not Park Min-sik's. A voice saying a single clear word that was caught in the data. Enough. This was the complication, the evidence that shattered the simple narrative. If Minsick wasn't the voice, who was? And why was a financially desperate tutor being set up? Lee's discovery forced a reluctant department to look wider. They traced the encrypted message. It led to a burner phone, purchased with cash, but the purchase was caught on a convenience store CCTV camera a mile from the crime scene. The figure was hooded, deliberate, and in one frame, a sliver of a wrist was visible. On it, a distinctive watch, a limited edition chronograph, retailing for more than Minsick would make in a year. The killer wasn't poor. The killer was wealthy. The investigation now split in two. One thread followed the money from Junho's shell company. It was a labyrinth of offshore accounts, but it all eventually led back to a single powerful investment consortium in Seoul. The other thread followed the watch. Only 17 were sold in South Korea. One belonged to a man named Choi Sung-chel, a mid-level executive at the very consortium entangled with Junho's shell company. Choi was polished, respected, and had a rock-solid alibi, a dinner with 3 colleagues that lasted until 10 p.m. The timeline seemed impossible. Gangnam to the restaurant was a 30-minute drive. The murder occurred just after 8. He couldn't be in 2 places at once. This was the second complication, the twist that elevated the tension. Had Officer Lee been wrong? Was the digital footprint misleading? The police were ready to drop it, to return to the comfortable case against Minsick. But Lee went back to the smart home data. She looked beyond the study. She examined the building's internal network logs. And she found the shock, the revelation that changed everything. At 7:58 p.m., 9 minutes before the struggle, the digital lock on the building's rarely used service entrance on the sub-basement level was disengaged not by a keycard, but by a master override code, a code known only to building security and the head of the Residents Association. The president of the association was Choi Sung-chel. He had let himself in, unseen. He had taken the service elevator directly to Junho's floor. The timeline was now terrifyingly clear. Choi committed the murder, left via the same route, disposed of the weapon and his clothes, and arrived at his dinner calm and collected by 8:50 p.m. The alibi was manufactured. The watch was a taunting clue. And the motive had nothing to do with Parasite. It was about silence. Act 3, the true Parasite. The climax came not with a chase, but with a confrontation of data. Confronted with the network logs, the sound analysis, and the financial trail, Choi Sung-chel's facade crumbled. Junho hadn't been killed for what he had. He was killed for what he knew. His shell company was a laundering operation for the consortium, and he had gotten greedy. He was skimming. More dangerously, he was preparing to turn state's evidence, seeking immunity. Choi was the cleaner. His mission was to eliminate the liability and make it look like something else. The Parasite narrative was a gift. He knew about the tensions between Junho and his tutor. He may have even stoked them. He planted the idea. He left the minimal, misleading evidence. He counted on the police to see only the story of class envy, to be so satisfied with that symbolic kill that they would never look for the actual, calculated one. Park Min-sik was the perfect patsy, a man whose entire life circumstance screamed motive. The real Parasite wasn't the struggling tutor aspiring for a better life. The real Parasite was the wealthy, connected man at the top, willing to consume anyone below him to protect his empire of silence. Min-sik was released, his life irrevocably scarred by the suspicion. Choi Sung-chel was convicted of murder and financial crimes. The system corrected itself, but only because one person looked past the story to the data. The resolution is not a clean victory. It's a chilling lesson in narrative bias. The police saw a story they recognized, a story their culture understood, and they forced the evidence to fit. They nearly condemned an innocent man because his life was a convenient metaphor. In the end, the key to solving the Parasite murder was to ignore the Parasite allegory altogether, to listen instead to the cold, impartial record of ones and zeros, the digital heartbeat of the crime scene that kept ticking long after the physical heart had stopped. The haunting truth this case leaves us with is that sometimes the most dangerous motive isn't envy from below. It is the ruthless preservation of power from above. And the most crucial evidence is never what fits the story. It's the data that dares to tell a different one.